And to continue what we were talking about from the other day, this Twitter civil war that was going on, it keeps getting worse. Cenk keeps doubling down and continues to embarrass himself further and further. I truly don't understand the impulse here from the guy, and it's genuinely insane to watch the Young Turks just self-immolate publicly day after day now, seemingly completely unaware of how it's coming off. So let's start off here. This was last night. Cenk says, genuine question: have Aaron Maté, Max Blumenthal, Glenn Greenwald, and Jimmy Dore condemned this hideous authoritarian and corrupt actions of the Putin government? I'm not asking if you want to bomb them, so don't strawman it. It's a layup, and you might have condemned him already. So just totally random, totally out of nowhere, referencing this piece from the Washington Post from June 6th.
On Alexei Navalny.
Yeah, and actually, Glenn Greenwald comes in here with the most legendary response I've ever seen. He says, "Go fuck yourself, Cenk. I'm not here to jump through your little McCarthyite hoops and pretend and commend things on demand. Have you condemned racist police abuse in Chile, or systemic corruption in Indonesia, or abusive prison conditions in Brazil? Why not? Try to comprehend this." And then he quotes Noam Chomsky here. But the point he's making is essentially that there's human rights atrocities occurring all around the globe. Throw a dart at the fucking map, and good chances it's going to land on a country that's committing some human rights atrocities. Certainly if it hit the United States, you could say that. So kind of the point he's making here is like, the entire mainstream media is already making this point for you, Cenk. They're already condemning Putin 24/7. If you turn on MSNBC, they're fear-mongering, they're Russiagating. It's been that way for years now. So that lane is pretty well covered. And I don't think that Glenn Greenwald is a simp for Russia at all. But the point he's making here is like, why? What? You just want me to randomly, on command, condemn something that an authoritarian government is doing? Why aren't you condemning what's going on in Chile or Brazil, et cetera, et cetera?
And it's just a means of obfuscation. And that's what, for people who can't see the Chomsky quote or aren't familiar with it, that's the point that he's making down here. He talks about how his own concern is primarily the terror and violence carried out by my own state for two reasons. For one thing, because it happens to be the larger component of international violence, but also for a much more important reason, that namely, I can do something about it. Right. And that's something that Noam Chomsky has gone back to repeatedly. If you try and get him or something, like if you ask Noam Chomsky about North Korea, like he's going to just swat you down. It's kind of the same thing that happened when we tried to ask Noam Chomsky about China. He pivoted back immediately and was like, well, let's talk about what's happening with the United States. And you're like, okay, I understand that, but I would also really like to know what the fuck you think about what's happening in China, because you're an intellectual. But, so it's kind of a two-edged sword with Chomsky, but I think Glenn illustrates his point perfectly here, whereas that it's not really their fucking job to go out of the way and be moral arbiters of the world. They're journalists with their beats. Their job is to hold the powerful account and expose, secrets and print facts. And that's what they've been doing. And that's why they can't substantively critique Aaron Maté. That's why they can't do a takedown of Max Blumenthal on their show where they say, here are all the lies that they printed in the gray zone, because there aren't any lies that they printed in the gray zone. You can't do a takedown of Aaron Maté's Syria reporting because it's been featured not just in the gray zone, but it's been featured in The Nation, where I guarantee you it was arduously fact-checked before they became the sole major publication that would stand by the Syria reporting that he had. So I just think it's absurd. And he's trying to just distract from the problem. He's trying to play into these like, oh, these are all the people who were anti-Russiagate. It's because they're simping for the Kremlin, all this stuff. And they don't. And the reason why they won't just be out like, oh, obviously, I don't support this shit, is because they don't want to play his fucking stupid game, which is the same game that the mainstream media tries to force all of these people who are critical of U.S. empire to play.
Yeah, and it's not 100% analogous, but it would be kind of like, going back to the Iraq war era and someone being like, are you going to condemn Saddam Hussein for this action? No one was denying that Saddam Hussein was not a great guy and he was a brutal dictator, etc. But it's like, when a country like America is clearly trying to heighten and escalate our military tensions with another country, it becomes pretty obvious why they're pointing to certain human rights atrocities versus others, for example, that are occurring in Saudi Arabia, our ally, or Israel, our ally. When it comes to a country like Russia, the reason why we're bringing so much attention to it, our media, our, elected officials, etc., is because it's one of our adversarial countries that we are trying to militarily escalate with, unlike a country like Israel, unlike a country like Saudi Arabia, which we defend the human rights atrocities of.
And we give them the exact tools that they need to continue to perpetuate the violence against others. Exactly. It's the same reason why my primary concern is the U.S. funding of Israeli terrorism, not the inner mechanics and productivity of Hamas. Right. Because Hamas's politics are not my politics. If you've listened to this podcast at all, anybody would know that. I'm not a religious guy. I'm a non-secular person. That's obviously incompatible. That doesn't mean I don't support the right of the individuals who are sovereign in their statehood to,
you mean make their own decision. By the way? You said you're a non-secular person?
Oh, I am a secular person. I don't. Yeah.
Anyway, Cenk follows up to Glenn's glorious "go fuck yourself" tweet, and he says, "I'll take that as a no, Glenn. I used to really respect you, and you were one of the only real journalists out of the lot.
Out of the lot, yeah.
Out of the lot. Sorry. I fight against authoritarian governments everywhere because I'm a progressive. This one was really meant as a layup. I was really hoping you'd easily say yes and move on, which is stupid." But then Glenn comes back with another legendary tweet, another hilarious response. "Yes, Cenk, you're doing so much to fight for the freedom of the Russian people. I hear they're erecting some massive life-size statue of you in St. Petersburg as soon as they get enough material to build it. Your courage in standing down Putin is an inspiration to us all."
Yeah, dude. I mean, it is embarrassing to watch Cenk do this because, he did used to have credibility in some capacity, and now it's just never coming back. Yep. You can never crawl your way back from this kind of personal and professional debasement, and that's what we're witnessing here. It's a real astonishing crumble, and I think the progressive media is going to be better for it in the long run because we've always known that Cenk was kind of a hack, right? Anybody who's been on the Joe Rogan podcast in 2012 being like, "I'm a capitalist. Okay, guys, as a businessman, I want to be the only person that's covering progressive politics and progressive media because that's just a bigger lane for us, man." Okay, well, guess what? Now you're not the only one doing it. It turns out basically fucking everybody is better than you.
So true. Very well said, Zach. Yeah, absolutely. And here he says too, Cenk follows up with this just a couple hours ago, so he's clearly still on this page, still trying to beat this drum of the anti-Russian shit, linking to a story about Vladimir Putin saying whether or not Alexei Navalny will live, who's of course his jailed political rival. And Cenk says, "Seems like a swell guy. No wonder so many on the left spend a huge amount of their time defending him. Look at his progressive position here." And again, he talking about this political prisoner. What's ironic about this tweet is that if you go back a couple years ago, Cenk was defaming and smearing Julian Assange, who of course is a political prisoner of the United States. I don't see you out here fucking condemning the United States for keeping a political prisoner in an international prison, someone who's not even an American citizen. I don't see you doing that very often. So,
and he does that same shit.
Is it fair to assume that Cenk is a fucking paid off American agent? I mean, kind of. He took $20 million from the Democratic Party. So again, another incredible case of projection.
Or not directly from the Democratic Party, but from Democratic Party.
Sorry, donors, Democratic Party donor Jeffrey Katzenberg. I apologize.
No, 100% though. And it's the exact same recipe that he had, right? I used to have a lot of respect for Julian Assange, and then he started doing reporting that was inconvenient for my political agenda. I think he's up now. And it's just like, no, he's just a fucking journalist that's not here to serve your political interests. He's also a fucking Australian. So what the fuck does he care about the inner workings of United States politics outside of ending the fucking terror that they're causing on the rest of the world, which he was primarily interested in exposing? And also, the corruption of the political. I mean, I guess they're specifically referencing the DNC. So, you could point out a hole in that argument and backtrack a little bit. But what I'm saying is the crux of WikiLeaks was attacking U.S. empire broadly, right? Hillary Clinton was just as much a stooge of American empire as any other serving, U.S. politician in any capacity, I would argue. She was just as gung-ho on drone striking, when she was Secretary of State, all this kind of shit. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you know, the guy's going to not really give a shit who wins the election. If you're you know, kind of like Juan Passarelli said when we had him on our show, we were asking him about the, you know, he was like, I understand for you Americans, like you might get something from, you know, voting for Joe Biden, whatever. He was like, for the rest of us in the world, like makes no difference. The war machine will drum on, the imperialist regime will drum on, and the attacks against and persecution against Julian Assange will drum on. So, yeah. Are you muted, Gavin?
Sorry about that. Thanks for pointing that out. But yeah, thanks so much, Steve, for this $4.99 super chat. Really appreciate that. And I totally agree. If you were tuning in yesterday, I was sharing some of my own experiences about how I used to really, really enjoy TYT. And I actually liked the balance of hearing someone like Jimmy Dore on the panel next to someone like Cenk, next to someone like Anna, etc. It was a good balance. It wasn't just an echo chamber. It was a lively conversation-based show. It was more edgy. It had more personality. Since then, literally in the last 2 or 3 years, all of that has evaporated. It's a shell of its former self. It's totally disgraceful, and really proof that, you know, the infusion of corporate cash is not a benefit for a show that already works. You know, if you already have something right, you know, adding a bunch of corporate influence and money into the picture is only going to fuck that up. You know, that's never going to make it better. And anything else is the delusions of a capitalist mind, honestly, which makes sense given Cenk's intense, you know, love.
I'm not a big fan of unions.
Yeah,
I'm not a big union guy.
But as former TYT employee, one of the better, you know, former TYT employees.
Shout out to a friend of the show, Jordan Sheridan.
Yeah, indeed. Friend of the show, Jordan Sheridan. Check out Status Quo. But as he says here, watching Cenk Uygur self-detonate is really something. And that is just so accurate. You know, it's been surreal, the level to which he's stooped, him and Anna, just really, truly embarrassing themselves.
It's an ego supernova. It's the exact opposite of an ego death that you would get if you were to eat a bunch of mushrooms. Maybe the one thing that will take... I'm going to get on my Joe Rogan shit. What TYT needs to do, guys, is we need to get Cenk Uygur to take a bunch of mushrooms, guys. That's going to solve the problem. He's going to have an ego death that's going to reset.
Honestly, that might be the best option. That might be in order. Someone needs to prescribe that motherfucker some shrooms. Absolutely.